When we think about moving to a new culture, it's easy to focus on new beginnings. There can be new houses, foods, new currency, new sites, new ways of getting around, and new jobs to get to. And while those new beginnings matter a lot, if we focus only on these, it can hide the reality that there is much more going on. In fact, the transition begins with a whole lot of endings first. The very fact that we are beginning so many new things means that we have also experienced the ending of many familiar things. But many of the endings are not immediately apparent. There are endings like not being on familiar streets, not feeling the familiar sidewalks under your feet. Endings that come with not being known at your local coffee shop or post office. The end of knowing how traffic works where you live. There may be endings related to being able to spend time with family and friends. And even endings like knowing how to pay bills or navigate a town can all contribute to the end of feeling competent, at least for a while. As these endings add up, they can really overwhelm a person. While these new beginnings, like new home, new locations, and new foods may be true, there are other realities that we need to attend to first. When we realize that we are encountering endings to important features of life, like being known, familiar patterns, and feeling competent, it can help us to realize that moving across cultures can actually be really disorienting. That disorientation generally leads to what William Bridges calls the neutral zone, or transition zone. This in-between space feels kind of like putting a car in neutral. It doesn't matter how much you step on the accelerator, it just isn't going to affect the movement of the car. If it's a gasoline engine, you could burn a tremendous amount of energy, but still go nowhere. The neutral zone is kind of like that. Or imagine a field used to grow crops. Sometimes farmers will let land lie fallow. They'll go through a season of not planting the field. To someone who doesn't know what's going on, the field looks unused, unproductive. Sometimes we imagine that this space is kind of like crossing a road. If we navigate transitions like we cross roads, then we should get through them very quickly. But Bridges cautions us not to rush through these transitions. Remember the land lying fallow? When land is let fallow, it has an opportunity to recharge, and millions of microbes and fungal networks rejuvenate the soil and make nutrients available for future crops. What looks unproductive is actually very productive, just not now. Because this time is really uncomfortable, it is important to develop healthy strategies for coping. We will cope one way or another, so it's good to be intentional. Eventually, the discomfort of the neutral zone will begin to fade and be replaced by new beginnings. The move is gradual when we don't rush it, and often the new beginnings appear sporadically. One of the really interesting things about the new beginnings is that, often enough, if we have given the transition zone enough space, even though it's uncomfortable, the new beginnings are a different quality than the ones we would have initially listed. For example, instead of just listing new transport system, we find that we have an expanded capacity. But with all of this change, including potentially threatening changes like new sense of self, how do we know what it means to be us? One of the most interesting experiences in navigating change is the rediscovery of who you have been all along through finding the thread of continuity. There are moments when we often re-remember things that we have known about ourselves but which seemed distant or forgotten for a while. Thoughts like, oh, that's right, I do like this, or oh wow, I had forgotten that I care about such and such, are common. So, to recap, transitions begin with a series of endings. Often, these endings are deeper and more disruptive than we realize at the surface. Those endings eventually move us into the neutral zone, which is a period of significant disorientation and through which we will need to cope well. But it's not worth rushing the transition zone. Eventually, new beginnings will emerge, which can be refreshing and invigorating. However, these new beginnings don't mean that we are not the same person. As we rediscover the thread of continuity, we find that we have learned new ways of being ourselves in this new cultural context. To learn more about transitions across cultures, check out Transitions Across Cultures by Stephen W. Jones. To learn more about transitions in life and to better understand the transitions model presented here, check out Transitions by William Bridges, or find his book Managing Transitions to see how his model applies to managing change in the organizational context.